Keir Starmer's recent speech at the Labour Party conference turned out to be a damp squib. Nothing stands out from it. It's really alarming how flawed the Labour strategy seems to be. Starmer spoke for an hour, yet the speech relied on broad, empty phrases. Much of the speech just amounted to political blah blah, promising tough choices without explaining how these would improve the lives of ordinary people. Light at the end of the tunnel, but you've got to stay in the tunnel for the foreseeable future. At a time when the public is desperate for real change, Labour should be providing a clear roadmap for tackling inequality and rebuilding public services. Instead, many of Starmer's proposals feel like hot air, familiar sound bites that echo and are likely to repeat the failures of past governments. A major mistake that Labour seems to be making is assuming that they have support for their agenda, that they have a strong mandate. They were elected because a majority didn't want the Tories. It seems incredible that Starmer seems to think that people voted for him because they liked his agenda. He seems to be oblivious to the sharp decline in his personal popularity. His approval rating has plummeted in recent weeks, driven particularly by the controversy surrounding freebies, clothes, glasses, Taylor Swift tickets, Arsenal VIP boxes. According to recent polls, his standing has actually fallen below that of Rishi Sunak. Look at the terrible trend. The dotted line represents the election. The blue line shows his approval rating. It increased initially, but then has fallen through the floor since. His disapproval rating has shown the opposite trend, the pink line dramatically increasing. This downward trend in his popularity suggests that the public is losing faith in his leadership, a worrying sign for someone who promised to restore integrity to British politics. Starmer stated, "A Britain that belongs to you," because politics sees public service as a privilege, not privilege as an entitlement to public service. This sounds noble, but the recent scandals surrounding Starmer and his team and their acceptance of freebies from luxury brands significantly tarnishes this message. If public service is indeed a privilege, Labour's leadership should be setting the standard for ethical conduct. Civil servants and local councillors have much stricter rules on accepting gifts. Why don't MPs have the same rules? The hypocrisy of accepting personal perks while claiming to serve the public undermines Starmer's credibility and the very idea of service free from privilege. If Labour's serious about restoring trust, it must confront this issue head on rather than just offering platitudes. Jeremy Corbyn may not have been the best statesman, perhaps he wasn't very prime ministerial, but he is a sincere man with integrity. Starmer and the rest of the senior Labour politicians just seem to be carrying on the same entitled attitude to being an MP that we had with the previous government. Also, Corbyn had an ambitious agenda, an agenda that was popular with the public. Starmer is more concerned with attracting Tory voters by moving Labour to the right, rather than trying to come up with a bold agenda. This has meant more or less continuing the previous government's policies, with tweaks here and there. In his speech, Starmer proclaimed that there will be no return to Tory austerity. We will rebuild our public services, protect working people, and do this in a Labour way. It's interesting to see that he says no return to Tory austerity. We're going to have austerity the Labour way. That's the truth. Starmer also suggested this will be tough in the short term, but in the long term it's the right thing to do for our country. This is alarmingly reminiscent of George Osborne's austerity rhetoric from 2010, which had devastating effects on public services and deepened inequality. Labour under Starmer is falling into the same trap, where tough choices will actually mean cutting back on essential services and asking working people to bear the burden, while the wealthy escape unscathed. Instead of austerity 2.0, The country needs investment in public services and a progressive tax system that shifts the burden onto those most able to pay. Starmer also seems to be continuing the Tory attack on the sick, albeit with slightly gentler language. He promised to tackle long-term sickness and support people back to work as a way of reducing the welfare bill. This approach is troubling as it paints those on long-term sick leave as a drain on public resources rather than individuals in need of genuine support. It risks pushing vulnerable people back into unsuitable work environments simply to reduce welfare spending. A more compassionate approach would focus on improving health outcomes and supporting those who cannot work rather than penalising them for the circumstances beyond their control. The critical thing is to get the NHS 7.5 million waiting list down. That will help people get back into work. Look, it is possible that there are some people claiming benefits who are not really sick, and who could object to them being identified and denied benefits. However, this has been the Tory policy for years. Even if Labour's fresh attempts do find some benefit fraud, this is not going to make a significant impact on the economy. It's not going to be the thing that creates growth. It really is focusing on the wrong thing, seeing this problem out of all proportion. Regarding the winter fuel allowance, which is pure austerity, Starmer said if this path were popular or easy, we would have walked it already. This suggestion that cutting the winter fuel allowance is unavoidable overlooks the fact that funding such vital support could easily be achieved through increasing taxation. Wealth taxes, especially on the richest, could easily finance this programme. Instead, the Labour leadership seems content to present cuts as inevitable rather than exploring bolder solutions. They're actually offering what they think is the popular or easy path. The harder path is actually to convince people of the need to pay for the level of services that we all want, including the fuel allowance. Confirmation of Labour's continuation of the Tory economic approach came in a brief remark that Starmer made about the private sector. He said if we want to be serious about levelling up, then we must be proud to be the party of wealth creation, unashamed to partner with the private sector. Of course, there's nothing wrong with wealth, and there's nothing wrong with the private sector. Both of these things are important in the UK economy. However, the private sector will not resuscitate the economy. This is the neoliberal lie. Even if it makes more profits, these do not trickle down to the majority. We need a government that restores the leading role of the state in providing key public services itself: railways, energy companies, water companies, healthcare. My fear is that Labour sees the private sector as a cheap way of trying to restore these public services and get growth. I fear that on current plans, for example, GB Railways and GB Energy, they're not the state really taking full control of these sectors. Without a significant increase in public investment, we're never going to improve public services, poverty and inequality. There was one area in the speech where I feel Starmer can be given a bit of credit. This is his stance on housing and planning laws. His willingness to take on NIMBYism and relax laws is a step in the right direction. Some communities will have to accept prisons being built near them, or new electricity pylons, or new homes. This is what he said. For too long, local opposition has stymied attempts to build new homes, and this has exacerbated the housing crisis. Starmer's approach here reflects a commitment to confronting these difficult issues and providing solutions to one of the most pressing challenges facing younger generations today. Of course, he could go further by the government building lots of new houses, but at least this is a start. I think Starmer's speech was really disappointing, but to be expected, I guess. We know what Labour's policies are now. The emphasis on tough choices echoes the failed austerity policies of the past, and his cutting of the winter fuel allowance and proposals for welfare reform risk punishing vulnerable people rather than supporting them. Furthermore, the lack of substance in much of the speech, combined with his declining popularity, really raises concerns that Labour under Starmer will not deliver the real change that Britain desperately needs. If any party is to succeed in real change, it must present a bolder, more progressive vision that truly tackles inequality and puts people before profit. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.